your shape is a dollar sign.
Dollar sign. Yeah, that to me honestly strikes me as a shape that a lot of movies have, maybe. Where you're mainly following some group who is going on probably like a physical spatial like real journey, and that group just has two sort of antagonistic characters who a few times in the journey are going to pop in and send them going on a different direction. They're going to cause an inflection point for them each time they meet this two. So you might even liken this to the structure of a Pokemon episode where Team Rocket appears three times.
Is Team Rocket the wiggly part of the dollar sign, or the straight line?
They're the straight line.
Straight line for Pikachu, and the Ash Ketchum is like the wiggly part of the dollar sign.
Yeah.
And perfect, because then if you have two bars going through your dollar sign, that's Jesse and James.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Muprov Musings. This is episode 73. I'm one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and joining me now on the line is my different host, Julian Bernardo.
It is really like a identity mixer-upper when you're doing a podcast with someone, because I'm hearing my voice in my ears, I'm hearing your voice in my ears, but sometimes we hit that podcast flow state where I don't know who's talking. Could be you, could be me.
I mean, I think that I got it right. I am one of your hosts, Hal Munger, and I was never going to say that I was anyone else in that opening.
I wouldn't think so. But if you did say you were someone else, that might give like a weird spin to this podcast, right? If you were Hal, but you introduced as Julian, and then, maybe I took over as Hal at some point, like, there's some like meta term for what that would do to the podcast. I'm trying to wrap my head around, but it's interesting, right? That idea.
Yeah. If you were taking over as Hal right now, what would you think you would probably do, say, talk about on this episode?
Well, I would probably be so struck by the fact that we were kind of switched with each other that I would say, screw the existing plan that we had for this episode. Let's make this episode about structure.
And
because the whole
go.
Well, I would talk over. I would say the whole structure of this podcast has just changed because you're me and I'm you, and so it's not just the content of what we're talking about that's different. The whole thing is going to feel different now that we're each other, right?
Yeah. And I think that I would rein us in as Julian and kind of steadily say, well, we do have some show notes for today, so maybe we can talk about structure a bit, maybe at the end of the episode, but we can also follow the structure that we have laid out already.
And we would go back and forth, and we would, in trying to enforce these two different structures, come up with some middle structure. But we're talking about structure today. That's the skinny of it. This is a super interesting topic for me. I think I'm right in saying that, Hal, you and I are like kind of structure heads. We really like thinking about improv structures and thinking about maybe started by thinking a lot about formats and stuff, but broadly you do enough formats, you direct enough, you start thinking just broadly about the ways that these formats are related on like this meta structural level, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that if you're trying to build up the skill, one of the best ways to do it is to do a lot of different formats that have a lot of different structures.
Yeah, and I think structure is I find it particularly interesting to talk about here because I feel like different people in the improv verse deal with structure in different ways. So I think that a lot of the improv verse is doing a lot of structure in their shows in the form of stuff like Herald or whatever. And that is a form of structure for sure that creates that show. And honestly, while that's more prescriptive than the level of structure that we're going to be talking about today, I mean, we are stepping back to that level of these different structures that we're talking about make you able to tell shows that aren't exactly the direct narratives that maybe we've talked about other times on the podcast. A lot of the other formats we've done, while they have different levels of structure, tend to be relatively straightforward narratives where each scene sort of follows the next. Maybe we're jumping around a little bit, but I think we're cranking the lever up right now and thinking about how might we really tweak this into things that are different from that maybe standard baseline in narrative of just next scene, next scene, next scene, with some, of course, switching to other characters.
Yeah. And the Julian and me will always say, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
So improv is already complex by nature. So keeping things in, if you're going to play with dials, pick which dials you play with and play with those dials.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it might be good at this point to like flag like why even necessarily think about structure and changing like what's the point of thinking about this, especially in light of like maybe typically the best way to get more versed with this is to just do more shows and more formats and stuff. Like what is the utility of thinking about structure on this meta level for a new play?
Yeah. So typically at this point in a series of Muprov Musings, we would start teaching you the structure of whatever format we were teaching you. Right. So if we were doing Hero's Journey, we'd teach you kind of how the general plot of a hero's journey works. Shakespeare comedies, you can go back, slashers, and they usually have one roughly overarching pattern that happens in most of the shows, where in most of the Shakespeare shows, they end in a marriage, they start with love, there's changing identity near the first, second, third, and there's a dramatic irony in the middle, and X, Y, and Z. With a new play, there is not that level of regularity. So rather than teaching you a structure, we're going to, in this brief time, try to teach you every structure, or more importantly, what are the building blocks to structure. And this will stay with you if you later want to direct a format and you're like, oh, I want to come up with a new structure. You can do the scripted version of a new play where you script the structure and you're like, okay, I'm going to use these tools and I'm going to think it out and I'm going to teach people how to do it. So this is useful even if you're just directing an improv format that's going to be regular improvised improv rather than improvised improv.
and that's, I think, if we're talking about the structure of a new play as being this meta structure of everything can change, that's why we've said before that you can't really understand, this sounds preachy or pretentious or whatever, but you really can't understand exactly what a new play is unless you see it multiple times. Because seeing it multiple times, you understand what parts of the high level structure of the show were just improvised on that spot that night. So hopefully we'll be able to give you the tools to think about, either you look at our episode and you take, oh, these are some interesting structures, let me grab that. Or what I think is the fun part, you start playing with improvising structure in your shows and see how far you can get with going in without a plan for what the structure is. Okay.
I think at this point, if I had to guess, our listeners may be slightly confused.
Yeah, we're meta talking about meta structure a bit too much here.
So let's dive into some of the slightly more concrete stuff of sort of the building blocks of structure, and then we can jump back out to the meta conversation if we want to later.
Totally.
I think that the simplest building block of structure is character dilation, honestly. So when you're thinking of like triptych, which is we're following three storylines that are progressing at the same time, or Julie mentioned the Herald, where the primary thing that's changing from scene to scene is who's on stage. So if you have a big cast, most scenes, part of how they toggle their structure is hero's journey. We're watching that hero through almost every scene. That person's staying on, and there's that character dilation. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's I think the key thing that that grants, or thinking about this axis of character dilation, uh, you just kind of want to, like, if you have a story that has multiple characters, you want to be able to see your uh, characters in smaller groups. You want to see characters that don't necessarily have to interact with one another. So one of the things that this like lever of character dilation grants you is, yeah, how focused is this show on a few people versus many people? We have stuff like duoprov that's really focused on two people. There's not really any character dilation that's happening there. But if you extend that beyond just two people, you typically want some level of subsets of characters on stage.
And crucially, just because you have character dilation does not mean that you have structure.
Right.
Some shows have totally unstructured character dilation. So it's random from scene to scene. Whoever just is kind of needed for the plot is on stage. Then the character dilation is not part of the structure. But there are lots of shows where it's like, all right, we're going to start with two people, then we're going to get two different people, then we're going to get two different people, then we're going to revisit. Or there are lots of shows where, like, I'm thinking I've seen shows where each character at some point during the show does a monologue.
Right.
And we know that repeated pattern is what's tying the show together. And we know that the show, if four people have done a monologue, there are five characters. We know the show is going to end with the fifth person doing a monologue. Or, you know, we always see these two people and then we see those two people and then these two people, those two people. Anything where there's a pattern.
And I would even, and we can talk about this, but I would even say that it's easiest to identify with a pattern, but that pattern might also be like a very sudden thing. For example, if you think about like Hamilton, right? That's a show where halfway through, a good set of the supporting cast is like gone, and they never appear again. I mean, their actors do, but it can happen on this like smaller, like very regular scale where it's like in between scenes we're doing monologues, or that this character dilation can be sudden and drastic.
Yeah. So just because you have a pattern, you only, until the show is over, you only know, you don't know whether the pattern keeps repeating. And that's part of the pattern. The next thing that you can pattern to make structure is time and temporal dilation. So the simplest form of undilated time is something like a TJ and Dave show, where you go and you watch, and time is the same for the characters as it is for the audience. It's just one continuous forward motion. But in most stories that you go see, there are some dilations of time. And what are, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I can start giving some examples. If you have some ideas, you can join. Some simple temporal dilations are the scene jump. So going from one scene to forward in time, skipping over in a beat. What are some other ones?
Yeah. Another or one that's like slightly more non-standard but appears very commonly is something like a flashback, right? That's a time dilation typically into the past to explain something that happened or give some sort of context.
There's slow also motion in a fight.
Yeah.
But I would put in also, like, having, two kind of stories going on at once, where you're sort of seeing both the full time of both of them feels like its own kind of unique thing, even though you could call it a flashback.
And the scene jumps too. I mean, there's a good amount of variance, I would say, to what that can look like in terms of, we can have, maybe this is a show in which our scenes are like days apart, loosely, like months apart, weeks apart, years apart. So that part of that can be amplified.
And once you start patterning that time dilation, that's when you start to get structures. Maybe your whole show takes place over the course of a day. Your whole show takes place over the course of a week. And there's 7 equal parts that are, each of them are days. Or maybe your show takes place over the course of a year, and there are 4 acts, one for each season. Those kind of structures can be really useful.
It's also I always love the sudden drastic time skip that throws. I feel like this happens in TV shows, and it always throws everybody off. But that's, I think, similar to the character drastic like shift of losing a bunch of characters. When you do something like that in a show, you can really add some sort of intensity or excitement if it's following like a climactic event.
Yeah, you can. The next thing that can be patterned to make structure that I've written down is theme, motif, repetitive event. Kind of like what we were talking with Anna on the last episode. A lot of times this happens with like the kind of rule of three. But a lot of the structure of the show is coming from seeing, the same type of situation 3 times or something like that. So, and it's different every time, but there are a lot of shows that have that. Can you think of any examples of that?
Give me a second.
I mean, even in slasher, it's kind of like that.
Oh, sure.
Where the kill is the repetitive event. So you could obviously look at the slasher primarily as character dilation, where you're weeding characters down, but you could also look at it as when we were making those heat maps of kills. That totally the structure was coming from something that has significance to the show being repeated in some sort of patterned way. And for the slasher, that pattern happens to be a bunch of kills near the 3rd quarter of the show.
I think a lot of like maybe heist or like action movies even have this kind of thing where the core thing that's motivating it is like there's like 3 or 4 like mini heists that they're doing leading up to the big heist, and the like feel of that is there's like scenes where they're talking, and then this big event scene where they all go do the thing, and now they've leveled up, and then we rest, we do the thing again, and then maybe that happens 3 or 4 times, and then the big one happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the last one that I have kind of can fit into into the previous one that we just said, but just like we've talked about character dilation, but I guess maybe focus dilation or like audience dilation of just if your theme or motif or event is a monologue towards the audience, like that can be a very big thing. If you have a narrator of your show, that can add a lot of structure. So just looking at when is the structure, when is it a character kind of alone, isolated, talking to himself? When is it like dialogue between 2 characters? And when is it addressed to the audience? And maybe also sandwiched into this is like, you can have a special type of character dilation that's like the frame narrative, where you can have characters who are on different levels. So like these 2 characters are telling a story around a campfire, and then we jump into the story. So those kind of weird framing things. There's another thing that can add structure to a show.
Yeah. So we I guess we have a lot of these sort of structures that we've written down. We also sort of have like maybe 4 things that can be mixed, but like classic ways to think about structure, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You want to talk about them?
Sure. So the ones we have written down are linear, episodic, parallel, and flashback. So let's think about those. So linear is pretty much most of the shows that we talk about. We're sort of having no crazy time dilations between scenes. Typically, we're following one story that's and they can vary in terms of like how long the story takes place over, but yeah, like you're not explicitly making any big jumps. It's whatever the jump is from the first few scenes to the next few scenes, like that's probably the level at which you're jumping throughout the whole story.
Yep. Flashback is anything that has a backwards time jump. So anything linear. Usually, I mean, you can have something like Memento where everything's going backwards, but oftentimes time is still moving linearly. It's not like it's literally the scene is going backwards. And then parallel and episodic are kind of their own like filters over these 2.
Yeah, I mean, parallel stories, I mean, this is like sort of a soft label. I mean, there are some like improv formats, for example, where it's 2 separate stories that are happening at once, and maybe they do or maybe they don't meet at some point. But that can broadly describe any story where you just have a set of different units of characters or events that are not necessarily intersecting for the whole show.
Yeah, the connection is more thematic than
Right.
I saw a great show. I don't remember what it was called at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival like 4 years ago, where it was the stage was cut in half. So right away you walk out in a new play, you know it's probably going to be a parallel show.
Yeah.
Physical improvisers have built you a stage cut in half, and one half of the stage looks like modern day, and we're following a professor at a college who's teaching about the history of race in America and is being harassed in different ways. And then on the other end of the shaw is taking place during the time of slavery and telling a story about telling the story of this photograph that's being used to harass the professor. So you kind of have these, they are related in that one does affect the other, but it's they're primarily thematically related.
Right. And that's a huge point that you bring up, that especially in this staged setting, you can really get a lot of value out of having some concordance between your structure and the set that you're working on. And so I think that's part of why we did shapes for the cold open, is like it's really fun, and I think adds to the show if you try to actualize like the narrative features or the narrative structure of the show in some real way. I think it makes it hit for the audience in a bigger way, whether they even notice it or not.
Mm-hmm. Because again, with a new play, the goal is not to create structureless improv where the scenes don't relate and it's just kind of nonsense. The goal is to create a new structure. So based on the first 2 or 3 scenes, or maybe just based on the first set, you're establishing a pattern of how the show is going to work. And you do that by starting to pattern things. So like, for example, let's try building one for the audience right now and see the kind of different structures you can make. What kind of set could you build on the stage?
Let's say I'm building a set. We're in Magic World where we have anything. So I'm building a set where there's like a tall sort of raised platform in the middle, and then like ladders on the side going up to it. And this is in the center of stage.
There's one ladder on each side of the platform?
Yes.
All right, cool. When I hear that, my instinct is to do a kind of parallel story. We have 2 ladders. So my instinct would be to have people on both sides of the stage, like we were saying before. But maybe like some sort of love connection. Like it almost feels like a Romeo and Juliet. Like we're sharing a Pyramus and Thisbe, we're sharing a wall or whatever. Where like these characters are going to sometimes meet at the top and have these scenes where they're together, but a lot of times we're going to see their separate lives on either side of the stage.
Yeah. And that can be actualized in or are we going to go forward, or are we just going to talk about that?
Yeah. Well, let's try so let's say that this was my idea.
Yeah.
And I decide to enter on stage left with a person talking about someone that I'm in love with. and that first scene is me talking about this person that I'm in love with.
Yeah.
Now, the Hal's brainchild would be for the second scene to feature someone else talking about being in love with me. You know what I mean? On the other side of the stage. And then at some point, maybe we meet at the top of the ladder. But Julian is going to throw total chaos into it. He has a totally different idea about what this ladder is there for.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, maybe we do connect on what the ladder is there for in a broad sense. But my hit off of your scene is to have the other person be entirely unromantic, like maybe a very like dull and like miserable, but maybe like disciplined life that this person is living, where they're not thinking at all about something like love. I think they let's say they have like their dad over, and they're having like a maybe like slightly tense conversation with their dad. That's what I would throw on the other side of the stage.
Yeah. And then maybe my character climbs the ladder and goes psst at your window.
And I'm imagining my character to be like sitting close to the front of the stage, like assumably like eating like cereal out of a bowl or something, watching TV. And I hear this psst. I think I would maybe sort of look, just go back to eating my cereal.
And what if I got louder?
So this might be an improviser like ordeal that happens between the two of us, in that my hit here is like maybe like the more you push, the more I'm gonna notice and like maybe start walking over to the ladder, but I'm gonna be pretty hesitant about really going in and like climbing the ladder or anything. Like,
and making
you might,
it real.
yeah, you might push me to that. Like, as an improviser, we might find that in that moment, but I would be playing to the character who is not really that, doesn't want to deal or think about that part of life right now, and is just trying to go back and watch TV.
Interesting. Another thing that was just popping into my mind based on this is like using the ladder to somehow represent time. Like, you know, if at some point my character decides to climb this ladder and then comes down it and just clearly starts a scene that's 4 years later or something like that. Right. I feel like that gives everyone an idea of what
that would be such a wonderful gift if you gave this as an improviser in the context of a new play. If Hal climbs down from the ladder and then, you know, makes it clear some great time has passed, everybody backstage hears that and goes, "Oh, okay, that's what the ladder is." And that's, I think that's a little bit of the shape or the feel of what it's like to try to improvise these structures. Is you're sort of hyper attentioned in the way that you typically are to the plot, but you're hyper attention to the structure stuff. And if you notice anything like that, you pick up on it and you say, "Okay, that's what the structure is."
And now you have the structure of your show too, which is it's a linear show, but with some big time skips, and you can cause this time skip to happen by climbing a ladder.
And one more note on these parallel shows that I think, like, just to expand the brain's possibilities, right? Like, you can have a parallel show, especially in the context of like staged theater. Mm-hmm. I think you can have a parallel show where the characters are like talking to each other or meet each other in some sense, but maybe they truly are in very different worlds. Like, they really can never actually meet physically in their worlds, but maybe they have these moments where they both go up to the ladder and talk to each other. That's something that, like in this abstract theater space, especially, I think can play. And so, yeah, parallel structures give you a lot of freedom to explore very different looking things happening on both sides of the parallel.
Yeah. That's made me think of, like, I just watched Arcane. There's like a rich overground and a poor underground. Mm-hmm. So you could do some sort of parallel story where it's actually locationally connected by the ladder. Right. And like you only climb it once or twice, but rather than it changing your time, just at some point in the show, one of the characters' heroes journeys themselves into the other world and suddenly is in Ladderland.
And the funny thing is that at the top of this, if I had answered slightly different when you said ladder on both sides, then we probably would have come up with entirely different structures. Like these structures can be very sensitive and attuned to what's happening on stage, and looking at stuff like if there's parallelism versus there's not about what's happening, that can really inform and make this whole process a lot easier than maybe it sounded at the top of this episode when we're rambling about meta stuff.
Yeah, like if it's ladder on one side, or I guess even if you just rotate the blocks so the ladder on both sides, but one's facing backstage, then it's just a door, and you kind of expect more and more people to be like entering and exiting, like doing one continuous thing. Right. And if there's only one ladder, then honestly, I'm expecting some sort of like Anna W type move where it's like everyone else is in a normal show and there's one like god who's climbing this ladder. and we just cut to the moon in this totally way.
Yeah.
Sick.
Sick.
Let's do one or two more of these because I feel like they're useful.
Yeah, I totally agree. Throw me a set.
Sure. Let's say you enter a stage and there is a table with table kind of at an angle, and it has 4 chairs around it, one on each side. Or actually, a long table, and there are 7 chairs at the table. Like a long table kind of facing the audience. And the whole side facing the audience has chairs, and there's one on each side.
Okay. And describe how I would enter the scene.
Yeah. How do you think the show starts? How many improvisers on stage? What's going on?
Yeah, I think if it's that many seats, even if the cast is smaller, I just think, especially in like live theater, my intuitions bring me to just filling up the seats, having all of the character improvisers we can have on set. And if there aren't enough to fill all the seats, then having physical improvisers who are sitting in the seats and then swapping between the seats in this click in, click out way, where we're they're maybe not the important characters in the scene, but this is a full table.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I'm also inclined, just on first intuitions, to make the call that this is some sort of like family, like a big family.
Yeah, that was the set of Improvised Festin, which I was just interviewing on the last episode. And that was, a mono scene with a big family. So you nailed it. But yeah, what happens if you see the set and you're thinking, oh, everyone should be on, and I enter as someone who's like setting the table or cleaning or,
Yeah, if you, well, immediate, like, because that's the thing, like, I'm attuned immediately now that you say that. If I came on stage when you were doing that, I'm already locked into thinking, oh, maybe this is kind of I kind of still see it as a mono scene, especially preparing for something like setting the table. To me, is signaling, oh, like we're preparing for some event, and if we're preparing for an event in an improv show, maybe that's an important event. And so I guess it would start quiet, but maybe more people would come eventually. Maybe this is a dinner party for many people, and it's like a more farce type thing.
Okay, I got another one for you. We all enter, 7 people family. We're expecting to start a dinner, and then Scrimbus turns out to the audience and starts a direct audience address monologuing, talking about a couple memories that they have with the family, and clearly from a point where, like, in time where all the other people at the table are dead. Mm-hmm. You're Julian, and there's a kind of silence after Scrimbus stops speaking. What do you do?
I guess intuition is to try to hard contrast, like some tonal thing about the monologue. Well, I guess either hard contrast or hard go into it. Either very much confirm something that they. I guess, okay, here's what I would do. If they mention something about us or the family, I would want to, like, not necessarily hard agree with that, but just put that in my head and maybe, keep that in mind. But if they were talking about themselves, I would want to try to throw a hard contrast of, you're just, you gave this monologue and you're acting like this, but I'm endowing you now in this time period that you're acting like this. Mm-hmm. So if they're very like sad or whatever in the monologue, or just they're feeling very down, reminiscing, then I'd want to imbue them with like a lot of happiness and joy in the present day.
So when you say that, do you mean like come downstage, kind of pull them downstage and start a scene and hope everyone else kind of drifts out? Or start a scene with all 7 of you at the table back in time? Or
I guess depending on how early the monologue started, I would or wouldn't expect the dinner scene to continue. If I didn't expect the dinner scene to continue, then I would, probably try to signal everybody away from the table, and maybe we're both sitting at different seats at the table, and signal like a light time jump, but start that scene. And maybe have maybe one or two more improvisers on stage. I don't know. I wouldn't care.
Yeah. It'd be kind of sick to have a show where all the seats were always filled, but only like two people at a time were actually like in scene and everyone else was just kind of neutral.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be funny. Like all scenes have all these people at them, but all scenes are really kind of just between two people. That's fun.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of shows that are kind of like, over a long period of time about a family.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like family with big time jump is a really common structure. Especially room as constant, because people often build a set for the room.
Exactly. Well, room as constant makes me think of the other direction to take this, which we sort of talked about before this, which is if maybe the story is about like that room instead of the people. Because when you first brought the table, that flashed through my mind, like, oh, maybe this is just about this house or something, and we could see different generations of people who are related, maybe not at all, maybe they are, maybe just thematically.
Yeah, maybe it's a political show and it's like this table is some sort of, UN decision desk or something like that.
Yeah.
And we see like a bunch of different points in a war, or like a writer's room might be a better version of that. But like we see a bunch of, big debate conversations happening at different times. Not a family at all.
Yeah, and it pumps the direction out, or like it puts you in a certain direction as an improviser. If you know, for example, that this is going to be a show about this table, then you're thinking, if this is true, then this table is probably important to a lot of people. There's probably a lot of serious things. Like, once you nail down certain things of the structure, then like they go hand in hand, and that the content maybe is more obvious.
Mm-hmm. Let's try to do one more, and this time, I won't spoil it. First, give me a structure.
A structure or a set?
A set.
Okay. I'm going to give you two long like black wooden boards that are laid sort of diagonally from back left to front right of the stage, and on the wood beams like have like I'm thinking like strings or some sort of like looping thing that's like holding them together. So like a white string that's being wrapped around both of the wooden things.
So basically, it looks kind of like a bridge that's stretching on the diagonal of this. Sure. And it's on the floor, so you could kind of ignore it even if you wanted to.
Yeah, you can totally step over it.
Interesting. Cool. All right. I want to try with this set, like intentionally doing a lot of different versions of these things. So, like, can you also give me a starting? Who enters first?
Like who is this character that enters first,
or just... how many improvisers enter on the stage, and where do they stand?
I'm saying 3 improvisers enter, and they stand on the half of the stage that is connected to the audience.
Oh, cool. I would have, I thought they were going to be like all standing in a line on the boards. That's a very different show. That's going to start with abstractness and monologues and bullshit. But if they're all standing on the same side, then that just sounds like it's a scene, right?
Yeah.
What's the first line of dialogue?
Who even said that this place would have Wi-Fi? I can't get anything.
Okay, so we're in super normal land. So like you could hit this kind of like you would a normal story spine of like, maybe these are friends who are staying in a hotel together because, or maybe their siblings are staying in a hotel together because their parent died, and they're all going to visit, the same place.
Yeah.
But now we have that. Let's kind of talk through in scene 1 of the show. Scene 1 is a normal scene length. It's not some crazy show where it takes the whole show or whatever. Uh-huh. We learn about the basic dynamics between the siblings, a little bit about kind of what frustrates them. They talk a little bit about their past. They talk a little bit about, the dead parent, etc. Let's talk about scene 2 now. So we have a normal scene. This is the world. What moves could you make in scene 2 that would sort of clearly establish a structure for the rest of the show?
So, one thing that in my head, at least, indicates one clear structure is if you start the scene with 3 different people on the other side. That to me is like a pretty clear like parallel structure maybe that you're doing, and maybe it like it would at least start parallel, but maybe that the actual visual of the planks implies that they'll cross over into each other's world or whatever. But that's one move you can do.
Yeah. The troll move you can do. The same 3 people, but like it's slightly different in some weird way. Like the parents are still alive, but at the same time, really don't make that move. That's the kind of move that confuses everybody. Sure. Another clear structure establisher for me would be start on the other side of the planks, and it's back in time. They're kids. It's clearly younger, and it feels like it's going to be flashing back and forth between this present thing that is a linear condensed narrative and a past thing that is a flashback strung out narrative. So big gaps in time between the different memories, whereas the current thing, it might take place over the course of a day.
One that comes to mind, if the first scene ends with them, I don't know, like sitting down or going to bed or whatever, on that side, we can lights down, everybody's still on stage. One player from the left goes over to the other side, and has a scene with mom and dad, maybe. Mm-hmm. Also from the past, probably.
Yeah. Super troll one. If the first scene was very long, like let's say that the first scene was 30 minutes, one character leaves the scene, walks down the boards and into the back of the stage, and then start a second scene with the 2. They're meeting there about that character's death. And that scene is another 30-minute scene, and finally there's a monologue at the end. Another character walks down the plank, and or maybe other people are introduced, but the plank of death.
Yeah I guess there's also moves where you end first scene, everybody's still on stage, physical improvisers come out, and the planks are long, but they're not that big, so they move a plank to now put one of the people in that middle region between the planks, so we can move the planks, as maybe indicating something here. That
John Mistally invented a format called the accordion, where physical improvisers, it wasn't exactly physical improvisers, but there were 4 people whose jobs were just to move these traffic cones. You each had one traffic cone that you moved. And if there was space in between 2 traffic cones, like in between each traffic cone was a world. So maybe one of them we did one that took place at a ski resort, and there was a hot tub, a ski lift, a slope, and a lodge or whatever. And if your traffic cone is open, your scene is going on. So, and if you move the traffic cone next to it, that scene gets closed. So you're kind of like an accordion. You can open different folds, and if you evenly space the cones, then all 4 scenes are happening at once. So simply by moving back and forth, you can change who's on.
A structure that comes to mind that would be fun is like just thinking about space on stage, right? There's like this, like 2 halves of the stage mostly, and then there's kind of like some space in between the planks. It would be fun to establish like a parallel story on both sides of it. And then you have something that's like a runner that's going on in between the planks. So we see like left side, right side, and then like a very short, maybe entirely unrelated like series of vignettes that are happening from within the planks. And depending on the tone of the show, it could be something, like something funny, or my mind went like somewhere like really weird, where maybe the vignette is like someone is like running full speed, like from one side, from the audience side back downstage. And that's just like indicating the switching between the chapters.
Yeah, cut to a pirate ship.
Oh, and then the strings, right? I mean, I guess we already did a new play show that had strings kind of heavily featured. So, but anyways, since there's strings around them, there could be something about after the first scene, physical improviser comes and unravels one of the strings on one of the planks or whatever, and like we see this as like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe their relationship is breaking or something.
And that like brings in this crucial element that the physical improvisers really can do, which is make clear the structure.
Right.
So like if the show starts out with one box on stage and then there's a scene and they bring out another box and then there's a scene and they bring out another, and they're adding one element to the stage and it's getting more and more crowded.
Yeah.
That kind of thing can be a really clear indication to everyone. Or if after every scene they dump a ton of garbage onto the stage, and by the final scene you're going to be in like a sea of just absolute garbage. That can add really clear structure. But I think you'll see in all of these scenes, like you want to make moves at the start of the show. You're not pre-planning what the moves are or any of that stuff, but you want to make moves that clearly establish patterns that can either be broken or accepted, of like doing this does this, climbing the ladder changes time, climbing the ladder changes space, climbing the ladder changes what height you are in relation to the audience.
Yeah. I think that's maybe we have like a cautionary tale. I think that the first new play was hardest, or like the worst feature of it was that we didn't have a very tight handle on the structure. I think we had like some confusion because it was sort of just jumping around in time. I think that's one where if we had like the numbers were getting, I remember that being one of the issues, like backstage, like the numbers were kind of getting confusing. We were saying, 9 months, if we had established a bit more regularity there could have been like we would have maybe found something like greater to tie into the theme of the show that related to the way that the time was passing. But when it passed a bit sporadically, aka we didn't signal such a strong structure, it became a little bit harder to do something like that.
And a lot of that comes from the third scene, right? If the second scene is a flashback, I think that, well, actually, let's talk about time dilations.
Totally.
And how the shows that effectively use patterns and have a third scene that's epic. So the most common time dilation, I think, is like in media res, which tons of real life media events start at the climax, give you like a little taste of it, and then go back in time, one big jump, and then you see the whole story leading up to the climax. You see the climax a second time, and you're like, "No, I understand what's going on."
Yeah, that's classic. One just classic direction you might think of. Oh, how might I dilate time? Is going backwards. So Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is basically doing this, where you're seeing their like relationship in reverse. I think where in media res like maybe hooks the viewer like backwards, maybe like disorients the viewer often. I think that Eternal Sunshine is maybe particular in its use of it, in that the story itself is sort of about forgetting and whatnot. And so I guess that's one sense in which creating this somewhat disorienting time dilation works in favor of the theme that they're trying to push.
Yeah, I think if you're going backwards, the point of it is usually to evoke nostalgia or like kind of dramatic irony, but not for humor, but like for sadness of like, oh man, look at how this pure before everything went wrong.
Right.
I feel like maybe Merrily We Roll Along has that, where it's like it starts out at their sort of maximum dissolution and they get back to, I have a dream of becoming a big star. Yeah. Then another mode of this is this kind of like memories thing where like we're in the present moment. And so you're doing flashbacks, but the flashbacks are moving forwards. The first flashback is the furthest back, and then it's like It's a Wonderful Life has that. Death of a Salesman, those kind of things where so you're telling a story, but there's a frame narrative, and the frame narrative is the furthest point forward in time that you ever see.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that this is good for like character studies. I mean, Death of a Salesman being the like a key example. Like if you're going through memories of someone's life, I mean, maybe you're going through memories of a family's life or something, but yeah, you're naturally the show is kind of about that person. And so you might explore how they changed over time or why they are the way that they are. Maybe you get in the modern time scenes that they're, they have some like big negative feature, but maybe by the end of it, you know why.
Yeah. Another version of this is like that's very similar is the two stories at once thing.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the memory story is less of a frame and more of like we're actually seeing two stories that are kind of more similar to each other, but one is taking place back in time, one is taking place forwards in time. So you've got two things that are moving linearly forward, but they're starting from different points.
So one of the weird ones that is very popular, think about the show Last 5 Years. We've talked like we did improvise Last 5 Years, and you know how it's jumping around better than I do, but it's not linear. It's not going wholly forward nor backward.
Last 5 Years is about a couple, and you see the story of the relationship over the course of 5 years. One of the members of the couple is telling you their story linear forwards. So every scene that's from their perspective, the next scene is a later scene from theirs. The other member of the couple is telling their story linear backwards. So the first scene you see from their perspective is the last scene of the show. And the second scene you see from their perspective is not the last scene of the show, it's the last scene temporally. And the second scene, and the last scene you see from them is the first scene temporally. But if the show was 14 scenes, which is what the real one is, that would mean that you start with the 14th scene, then you see the first scene, then you see the 12th scene, then you see the third scene, then you see the 10th scene, then you see the 5th scene, then you see the 8th scene, then you see the 7th scene, then you see the 6th scene, then you see the 9th scene, then you see the 4th scene, then you see the 11th scene, then you see the 2nd scene, and then you see the 13th scene.
Got that?
Yeah, lock it in. It's one of my favorite formats. But a simpler one would be just like to the center of like, rather than crossing each other the way that one does, like first, last, second to last, third to last, fourth to last. That's a simpler version of it. Kind of just ping-ponging back and forth.
We also have, you can tell like generational stories that are sort of passing over long periods of time. I think, there's lots of different types of like relationships and plots that this like lends itself to, but like broadly, you can maybe tell bigger stories in this sense of if you're trying to like it seems like this sort of story lends itself to like a grand, tragedy or grand victory or something of some group over time and how it changes and whatnot. Yeah, but it's like less zoomed in on probably the interpersonals at each stage.
I've never actually seen a good improvised generational story. I've seen one improv show that was about like the same location that and the different things were like, hundreds of years apart, but I've never seen like, this tells the story of 100 years or, even 50 years.
Right.
Never seen that done well or done at all. It would be awesome. Another thing that I love that is difficult to know how to do is the restart from a different point of view. The classic Ender's Game, Ender's Shadow. There's a book called The Candy Makers that I love that does this. But you see a story and then you see the same story over the same period of time from a different character's point of view. Really hard to execute in improv because it's really hard to repeat scenes and remember what's going on. But if you are legendary and your show kind of is wrapping a little too quickly, you're like, oh man, the show's almost over. cutting back to the beginning of the show as a different character and then just starting it again. Crazy. It's just like a crazy move to do. Really hard to telegraph that to everyone else. So it's a risk.
Yeah, it would be legendary to see that pulled off for sure.
I think you might have to literally just come out and say to the audience, we'll now see the same story from this character's perspective, because it's too risky to try to, just start the scene back in time and have people understand that.
Because then if anything from what had happened later in the story leaks into the first scene, then it's just over. But I think that highlights the part of the use of physical improvisers is that they, as people who are not really playing characters in the story, have a little bit of a privileged position in terms of if they come out and start talking to the audience about some sort of structural thing, or, this is what's happening now. It both allows the audience to continue to view the character improvisers as the characters in the story, as well as more clearly, I think, signals to everybody involved that something is happening now, rather than this is a line of dialogue that the character is saying.
Mm-hmm. Other time dilations involve like time travel, like that opens up a whole new can of worms. But then you also have like, all right, is this an hour? Is this a week? An evening? One of my favorite books takes place over a course of a week. And then the final thing that we were doing in the cold open is this idea of strange shapes, drawing a shape and then making a temporal dilation based on it. And the example that I give for this is To the Lighthouse has the shape of an H. That was Virginia Woolf in her journal drew kind of block letter H. She's like, I want to make a book that's like this. And what that means is that the first 100 or so pages of the book take place over the course of a day, and it's super in-depth and detailed. And then there's a little middle thin part of the H that takes place over the course of 30 years where time is flying by. And then there's another day, 30 years later, that's really, open and in depth. So you can draw a shape and try to imagine how that works. And the waves also is kind of shaped almost like a clock or a sundial. It's such a cool structure. You have 6 characters and you see them all at different phases of their life. You see them 9 times, but in between each of those phases, there's just a little vignette of a single day, but a day from the perspective of nature. So it's it's talking about the sunrise, and then you see them as kids, and then it's talking about the morning, and you see them as older kids. And
I have to get in just the zeitgeist right now, which I'm, happily participating in, which is Severance, is a show that's on right now that has interesting structural elements, and that there's these 2 sets of characters that are, the same person, or maybe they're not the same person. But that's I guess that's an example of them doing a parallel story that yet somehow the people are the same between the 2 stories.
Yeah, that's a great. But for all the stuff for practicing it, the real thing that you need to practice is the ability to make these kind of hits clear. Mm-hmm. So we kind of would practice enough of a show up until the point where this thing had happened, kind of. So we would do it in these. We would do these what we call trees. So we'd build a set, and then we start a scene on the set, and then we would, using the same set, maybe start a totally different scene. The same set, start a totally different scene, and just see the different ways you could start a show. And then we'd pick one of those branches that we'd had and been like, okay, let's lock this in as reality. This is the first scene of the show. And we would do a potential second scene off that show. And then we would try doing a very different potential second scene off the show, and then a very different potential second scene off the show. And maybe we'd follow another branch and do a different potential third scene. And after each of the scenes, we kind of would talk about what the pattern was that had been established. So if you can kind of see how that works.
Yeah. I remember in this in doing practice on this kind of thing, sometimes you start a show, and if it's not clear enough, then 2 people have maybe different ideas of the structure. And then there's a awkward third or fourth scene that happens. And That's exactly the work of just doing that, talking about it after. Oh, I was trying to say this. I was trying to say this. Da, 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 iterate, iterate, iterate. I think that's pretty much the key to getting this down, is to just try it out and communicate when there are misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm. And you're still doing new play prov, like you're still not actually thinking at this meta level. The weird thing is you just go out, do something, and then kind of based on what the thing is, be like, intuitively, is this a story that takes place over a long period of time? Something about what originally happened is what makes you think, oh, this intuitively to me feels like a time jump or whatever.
And that's the point of the practice, is you're thinking about it in the practice a lot, and you do it and you enter this state of not thinking in the practice enough that you just have it sort of hardwired in you to some degree. You have these sort of loose intuitions towards certain directions, even though you're not thinking about it.
Yeah. I'm looking back at the document that I gave you guys for describing every narrative structure when we were learning it. Other ones that I have, there's a whole meta category in case we wanted to do a play about someone writing a play that's catching up to reality, or a play about characters putting on a play, where you're seeing scenes from the play and then you're seeing scenes from the external play, or characters who know that they're characters. Two stories at once, or all the different types of narrators. So you can have like Greek choruses or frame narratives or remembering narratives, or something like Gatsby, where it's like kind of an observer who's not really the main part of the story, but who's the one who's telling the story. And I had every category of like all the different shows that we'd done, so like diptychs and triptychs and duoprovs and monoscenes and slashers and directors, and two roads diverge and 3 acts rising action and quintet, just like every I don't know, all these different structures that we had done were in this kind of mega list of like, really, you can do anything but make strong crazy choices.
Yeah, think about your favorite pieces of media and think about what shapes they are, what choices they're making. That's something you can do outside of doing the improv to try to wrap your head around some of these ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is such a fun episode, honestly. It's chaotic and confusing, but it's really like just a sandbox for you to go off and explore. And really, this is the part of a new play that takes a lot of time, and a lot of our practices were spent in these trees and just cutting through the weeds. But this is really the part that's fun and exciting. And I truly believe that someday this is kind of where improv is going. That you're going to see a lot more shows where this is truly the art form.
Yeah. It's hard and exciting because it is, in the same way that it talked about in You Play before, like it does feel like it's more improv than normal improv. You're improvising the structure. There's more that's just on the spot, and it's so exhilarating and so easy to fail, but also so fun.
And it kind of has the improviser as author thing.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of times improv shows don't feel like they have an author because they were kind of made by a collective, but learning as a collective how to be like, okay, we're going to start doing things. Like the big part of that scripted theater has is that kind of writerly through line of I'm going to have patterns and themes and all this epic stuff, and realizing that you can build that collectively is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it's time to wrap. You're right. So without sign up for the Unscripted Shakespeare Festival. If you're still listening, go to their website, go to thornandpedalstick.com, sign up. And without further ado, this has been Muprov
Musings.
So my sign off is going way back. It's like a month ago at this point. But I don't think we've actually done an episode since Improv Amsterdam, and I just went to that, and it was crazy. You've heard the episode with Improvised Festin. Go, if you haven't, go listen to that. But yeah, there were so many crazy shows there that really were changing the way I was thinking about improv, and so many different teachers that I interacted with, and new power players into my improv sphere to know about.
What was one crazy show?
Besides Festin, my favorite show was called Threesome. It was a French group, Alice Ray, who may have taken the place of best improv performance that I've ever seen given by an individual. Directed it and starred in it as one of 3 people. The structure of Threesome is that 3 people come forward and they get from the audience like some suggestions to build their characters, particularly like their ages, sexualities, employments, and Alice got like an animal to inspire her character. Hers was squirrel, so her character was just a little fidgety, and kind of hyper and scared. And then after that, the show is kind of like an hour and an hour, but the 3 women are meeting to have a threesome. And so it's the lead up. You don't know whether they will. Some shows they do have a threesome, some shows they don't. But yeah, there's 3 people who have met with the intention of having a threesome and then are talking in the lead up to it.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Were they going to in the show that you saw?
By the end of the show, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there was also some sexual stuff that happened mid-show, but that's really not the point of the show, is maybe one way to say that.
Yeah.
It was awesome. It was just very like female empowerment, queer storytelling, open. It was really, really fucking funny. That was the other thing. It was just continuous hilarity and really realistic. Anything that was on stage was real. So like there were these plastic flowers, and she was like, "Why do you have plastic flowers?" And the couch was kind of messed up underneath it, and they pulled it up. I had been the roadie for the show, and I brought out the couch, and we were covering it with a blanket, so we left it looking really weird underneath the blanket. And they pulled up the blanket, and they saw that it looked really weird, and that became part of the show about the person who owned the house or whatever, Everything was, and they had all these real food, and funny stuff was happening with that, and real bottles that they were trying to open. And but it also, with all the humor, there was like, the show ended where Alice's character had been really goofy the whole time and nervous and kind of delaying the threesome. And by the end of the show, it was clear that something really awful had happened to her at a kind of young age. I think that maybe she was assaulted, or there was something that made it so that she had a really bad experience with men. And that was clearly why she was so nervous about like all that humor is coming. And it had this really heartfelt kind of restorative moment. And there were all these other moments along the way as well that were really beautiful, where they were just like sort of processing insecurities about bodies and loving them. I don't know. Just like a lot of empowering, awesome. It was great.
Yeah, it sounds freaking awesome. What was the group again?
I think the group might just be called Threesome.
Oh, yeah.
I think if you Google Alice Ray, you can find it. ALICEREY. Alice Ray. Threesome. Oh, nope, that is, oh, no, don't Google that. Don't Google that.
That's what I was thinking.
Never mind. Impro Amsterdam. Yeah, Alice Ray 2 on Instagram. I mean, you have to be in Bordeaux and to watch the show and speak French and all this other stuff.
So go to Bordeaux.
Yeah, Alice.Ray2 on Instagram.
Shout to the out.
Can't you see me now? Like you always did. Can't you see me now? I just wanna be with you. when the times they seem so crazy. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? See me now. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? I remember way back when. Oh, and times they are changing. You know, things are rearranging. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now? Everything is changing. Can't you see me now? Can't you see me now?